Hello, this is the Green Report, Rappler's show on the environment and the stories of people whose decisions impact the world around us. I'm G. Geronimo.
And I'm Iya Gozum.
And nagbabalik kami dito sa studio. And today we have one of our thought leaders, Rappler's thought leaders, and an expert on natural hazards, geology, and environmental science. We're going to talk to Dr. Kelvin Rodolfo. Welcome, Dr. Kelvin.
Welcome.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. How do you find our studio here in Rappler? It's your first time in Rappler.
Yes, it is. I'm very impressed, especially by the fact that it's so open when you come in.
Yeah, right.
So it's very nice. It's wide and open. There's no secrets.
No secrets. Di tayo sure.
Not sure.
Yeah. But sir, it's so nice to meet you, and we have been, although it's our first time meeting you today, you have been our resource person for a lot of stories already on Rappler, especially the reclamation stories. And you have also been writing thought leader pieces for us on the environment.
Yes.
I guess just to acquaint you with our listeners, our audience, what started you, or how did you start? How did your interest start in geology, in natural hazards, and in environmental science?
Well, I went to UP Diliman in 1952. And
May buhay na ba dito noong 1952?
That sounds
Wala
so
pa.
long ago.
Was your mother born yet? Not yet.
No,
No,
not yet.
not yet.
I think that I was probably too young to be serious
That time.
at that time. So as a first year and second year student, I was not very serious. And I actually flunked out of school. Dalawang 4, isang 5, isang semestro.
Wow.
But that made me wake up. I removed the 4s to 3s, and I came back in. By good luck, I took a course in geology from a very dynamic professor who made the subject live and breathe. And he made me into a geologist, and he made me into a geology professor. And through him, I have been teaching. He teaches through me, because I've been teaching since 1966 at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And I'm forever grateful to him for having me such a good professor.
Right. Even today, sir, as we speak, you still teach classes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Even in the Philippines ba, or just abroad?
Pag-ulit.
Meron po ba kayong tinuturuan din dito na classes, or just?
Hindi classes. Kaya lang parang informal consultant ako sa Project NOAA. And I interact with the young researchers, and I dearly enjoy it. It's so much. What keeps me young is interacting with young people.
Really?
Like you.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank you for calling us young. What do you like about teaching the most, sir?
I like teaching the most if I have a difficult subject to teach, to learn about it properly, so I know that I'm teaching fact, and then I learn how to make it understandable, which is maybe even harder than learning kung anong katunayan nun, ano. And the reward nasa mga mata ng mga estudyante pag nakaintindi. There's no better reward in the world.
Right. I think
Kind of like what you felt when you got that course in geology from your mentor.
Well, after 2 lectures, I was a geologist already. He was so good. This is what I want to do.
Right. And I think parehas, di ba tayo rin naman journalists, that's also our hope that when we relay or when we report on these things, ganun din, the people will understand what we're reporting. So first, we have to understand it. Sir, I'm curious, what is the biggest myth or misconception in your field to this day? I mean, you've been in that field for decades. What is the biggest? What frustrates you the most?
What frustrates me the most is the fact that people do not understand global warming. And global warming is the thing that is changing the climate and people don't really understand it properly. Even I don't understand it entirely because it has been a subject I've been studying for a long time. And anyway, global warming is not bad. Without global warming, we would not have life on Earth. Global warming is not caused by CO2. The main greenhouse gas is water vapor. And yeah, that's basically, and that's what I want to try and teach the most right now is to enlighten people about the true nature of the global the greenhouse effect, which is causing global warming and climate change.
Sir, you've been teaching for almost 7 decades,
Yes.
right? And you said it's a joy to work with younger people.
Yes.
What do you think are the most pressing issues that you think young geologists, budding geologists, should focus on?
Dito sa Pinas o kahit
Here in
saan?
the Philippines.
Dito sa Pinas, ang pinakamalaking problema ay kulang ang respeto sa agham. It's very hard to be a young person who wants to be a scientist in a country where science is ignored and denigrated, and scientists are viewed with suspicion or are considered to be politicians when all they're trying to do is to tell the truth. Because sometimes the truth goes against the wishes of the powers that be.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh. Did you experience it, sir, when you were younger?
No.
I mean, were there difficulties for you to really study this field when you were still in the
Of course, there were difficulties kasi hindi gaano katalino itong utak ko. That's the first thing. That's my greatest difficulty. But at the same time, nung panahon namin, nung binata pa ako, may respeto sa agam. People respected science.
Yeah.
And ang nangyari, over the last mga 10 years, ganun, ang social media ay winawasak ang respeto para sa science.
Right.
Binabaliwala, minumura. And that's very frustrating because truth is truth.
Right.
Whether people like it or not, truth is truth. Di
I
ba?
think right now it's really especially hard to be a scientist, to be a journalist. You know, people who deal with facts, with truth. What's kept you going? Or why do you keep doing science?
Well, I've been doing, sinabi mo nga kanina, 7 decades na. Itong huling decade lang, lumitaw yung problema na binabaliwala ang science. And so I had six decades of respect as a scientist and understanding of what science is. And then social media somehow changed everything. Everything.
Right. Sir, as I mentioned earlier, you are one of our resource persons on the reclamation stories that we have been running since 2020. And you've really sounded the alarm, especially on the reclamation projects in Manila Bay. Of course, that is a very complex issue that is too complex to even cover in just one podcast or in one show like this. But what for you is the strongest argument against reclamation projects? Or why should people really stand against these projects here, especially as we know, ang dami ng reclamation projects dito sa Pilipinas. Why should people really, alamin pa nila yung issue na ito at talagang they really talk about it?
Pinakang problema reclamation will kill people. Maniwala po kayo. The most frustrating thing is, nung mga 2014 yata, JICA, the Japanese Institute for International Cooperation, FIVOLCS, and the Manila MMDA. They made a thorough study of the possibility of a major earthquake in Metro Manila on the faults running through here. Ang sinasabi nila, almost certainly magka 7.2 dito. At kung basahin mo yung description nila kung anong nangyayari sa 7.2, makikilabutan po kayo, maniwala. Trust me. So they made a thorough study, which among other things shows that reclaimed areas and even natural coastal areas will suffer the most damage. Nung pumarito ako kanina, nakilabutan ako dahil ang dadaming mga high-rise dito.
Right.
Kung halimbawa magka 7.2, maniwala po kayo yung nakikita natin sa nangyari sa Turkey.
Yeah.
Nung nakaraang buwan, ay nako, this will be even worse. Kasi po, one of the worst things is na yung ginagamit nilang mga buhangin at graba para sa konkreto, nanggagaling sa pinatubo. Kung tignan mo isang bato na galing sa pinatubo, parang ampaw baga. It's full of holes because that rock was a bubbly liquid before it solidified into a rock. Kaya maraming mga butas. You can make concrete using that material as long as it's not bearing weight. Pero kung halimbawa gumawa ka ng column na para sa LRT, if you use that, siguradong babagsak yung LRT mo. And I don't know how many of these tall buildings around here used pinatubo sand and gravel. Pero it's the cheapest and the most abundant and easily available. Saka magaan sa truck, di ba? And so they've been using that. Kaya pati kayo dito sa, anong pangalan itong gusaling ito?
Estancia.
You better investigate for yourselves kung anong ginamit nilang grab at buhangin dito. And you can find that out. You need to do that. Yung nung nagkalindol sa Turkey, nakikita nyo, ang dami may mga high-rise na okay lang, pero yung mga iba talagang bumagsak. Kasi walang quality control at hindi tama yung pagkagawa. And I'm afraid that in Metro Manila, kulang ang quality control sa construction. So, nung nakita ko yung nangyari sa Turkey, I'm looking at Manila, or maybe it will be maybe even worse than
you're
that.
saying, sir, that what happened in Turkey is something that can happen also in Manila?
Oh, absolutely. If the government and PHIVOLCS themselves say na magkaroon ng 7.2, maniwala po kayo, magka-problema tayo dito. Lalong-lalo kung yung mga gusali ay pinatayo sa reclaimed. Dahil pag may lindol, hindi lang nayuyugyug yung lupa at nagiging parang liquid yung kasi may lamang tubig yung underlying soil. Nagiging parang liquid, ay di wala na, maaaring tutumba, hindi lang babagsak gaya sa Turkey, kaya maaaring tutumba, magtitilt at tutumba.
Right.
Very frustrating. At the same time, the government knows that there is going to be a 7.2, bakit pa nila pinapayagang mag-reclaim?
Right.
Kaya ang sinasabi ko sa mga tao ngayon, kung ang plano mo ay bumili ng property sa reclaimed land, una, maghanap ka ng disaster and damage insurance.
May ganun, is there such a thing here in the...
Well, if there's not such a thing, that's because there's no money in making
That kind of
insurance.
right.
Kasi yung mga, sigurista yung mga insurance company, di ba? Kung hindi gaano ka panganib, okay, we'll make money selling insurance. Kung on the other hand, alanganin, they won't give you the insurance. So that's the simplest thing. Try to find damage and disaster insurance. And if you cannot get it, let that be a warning to you. Don't be stupid. Don't buy. Don't build.
How about the affected communities, the directly affected communities ng reclamation? Like we've heard of, displacement of fisher folks. But what do you think we can do more, even the scientific community here in the Philippines, to really speak out against this reclamation?
You can speak out all you want, but if the reclamation is going on, what does speech matter? How does speech matter? Naawa ko sa mga isda na displaced. And then, very recently, may mga false media reports na quoting authorities na patay daw ang Manila Bay, wala nang isda. And they misquoted or people who they never talked to say patay na ang Manila Bay, so it's okay to reclaim. Pero sa kasalukuyan, they are dredging the bottom of the bay to make material for reclamation. That is destroying the environment of the fish, even though there are still fish here.
Right. Yeah. Just to go back, because we've been talking about the Turkey earthquake na rin, and I actually wanted to ask you because this is really it has been in the news cycle for weeks now. And just today, I actually researched, umabot na yung death toll to 55,000 in Turkey and Syria. Maybe our listeners or our audience are curious, bakit ba sobrang deadly nitong Turkey earthquake nito? And why are there so many people who have died?
Well, the bigger and stronger the earthquake, the more people die. That's on one hand. That's nature. On the human side, ang panganib na gawang tao ay walang quality control sa pagpatayo ng mga gusali. Whether it be no standards or lax standards or enforcing officials being bribed or whatever. In my experience doing natural hazards, and I've been doing that since the 1980s, part of the problem is nature, and part of the problem is human.
Humans, right. Is it too late, sir, or is there anything else that we can do here in the Philippines?
Well, I mean, I look at all these buildings. I don't tell everybody to evacuate. Will anybody even? They would just laugh at you. I don't know. I have no.
Is there something ordinary citizens can do? Because if we're not implementing proper standards into buildings, and we keep on, and companies keep on doing reclamation projects, are there anything that ordinary citizens can do about it?
Well, kanya-kanya na. I mean, you have to take care of yourself and you have to take care of your family, hindi ba? And that's basically what it boils down to. Everybody has to exercise sound judgment in the decisions that they make.
Right. When they purchase, for example, properties, or if they buy a house here, kung meron pa dito sa Metro Manila, sobrang na rin, dami na rin. But sir, what lessons can we learn from that tragedy in Turkey for here in the Philippines?
Well, if you see 6 buildings surrounding one building that totally collapsed, you know that building was not well built. And you can look and see kung sino nag authorize na yung pagpatayo, di ba? But I can't go beyond that. I'm frustrated.
Right.
I'm frustrated.
It's frustrating.
I think we should all, at this point, really be frustrated. And mayroon bang way to prepare for it, sir? Kasi di ba, syempre, it's such a big tragedy that could happen here in...
Maybe just on an individual level. We can
what it boils down to, tama. What it boils down to is individual responsibility. Not individual and familial responsibility. Because, look, the government told us that we are going to have a 7.2. Maganda yung science, very thorough, well done science. But the government at the same time is allowing reclamation to happen. When if you look at the maps in that study, yung mga pinakamasamang lugar, mga pinakamapanganib ay mga reclaimed areas, mga hindi lang reclaimed areas but areas underlain by weak coastal materials. So at the same time that the government is telling you, the big one will come sooner or later, and the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. And at the same time, they are permitting the building of, they are permitting reclamation, and also destroying the environment of the bay at the same time. If I'm angry, if I look angry, I probably am, no?
I think it's a bit bleak to think about it when we think about how we can prepare for these disasters on an individual capacity, but the government keeps on implementing these projects. Parang
Well,
medyo hopeless.
I have always said all my life, any country in the world, every country in the world deserves the government it has. Whether it be Russia, whether it be United States, whether it be Pinas, every people ultimately are responsible for their leadership, di ba? Hindi maiwasan yan. So, if things have to change, it maybe has to be the way the people choose their leadership. But being 86 years old, I have not seen really any improvement in the quality of the way the country is governed. I hate to say that.
Was there no administration that listened to science?
Well,
From your experience,
some
from your
listened
perspective.
more than others. But I have to say that the previous one was one of the worst in paying attention to science, except for one thing. I want to give President Duterte the credit for trying to implement population control. Because at the bottom of all of this is that Filipinos are procreating faster than they can give them accommodation and jobs and whatever. So that's the one good thing that I credit President Duterte with. He tried, and he succeeded fairly well in Davao, but not the whole country.
Sir, let's turn to one of the issues that you've written and published in Rappler most. I think you've written at least 4 or 5 pieces on nuclear power. Some climate advocates are saying that nuclear power is actually climate friendly and that it's a prerequisite to transition to clean energy. What do you think about this?
Pusa nga ma. Nuclear, what happened was Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened, no?
Right.
And everybody, when after it happened, the U.S. government felt very guilty, and the scientists felt very guilty. And since then, many scientists and many governments have been trying to make up for killing so many people in such a terrible way. So they started pushing nuclear power. But let us talk about BNPP and the climate impact of BNPP. Ang BNPP, every year, kailangan ng 100 tons of uranium. Yung 100 tons na yan, hindi basta dumarating sa output point na carbon-free. Yung saan nanggagaling yung uranium? Yung batong minimina na may lamang uranium, yung uranium ay 0.1%. Kung kailangan ng 100 tons per year, you have to mine 100 medyo mahina ako sa arithmetic. But you would need to mine 100,000 tons of rock containing 0.1% uranium. Kailangan imina, kailangan igiling, kailangan i-extract yung uranium. Tapos karamihan ng uranium na yan, hindi yung 235 na ginagamit sa power plant. Mostly 238 siya na hindi magagamit. So you have to separate those. And then you have to enrich yung natural content, let's say, my arithmetic is very, very, very flimsy right now. Especially, I'm so old and nag-uuyanin na, no. But you have to extract, and you have to make. All of that takes a lot of power, Hindi basta dumarating yung uranium mo sa planta na carbon-free. Kung tignan mo yung mga napakalaking butas na ginawang ginamit na pangmina ng uranium sa Australia, 2-3 kilometers in diameter, half a kilometer deep. Dati, puro bato yun. What made that hole? Did nuclear power make that hole? Diesel made that hole. Diesel put out CO2, di ba? Yung mill na gumiling, that took energy too. The enrichment took energy too. Now one of the problems is much of that is government subsidized. In other words, taxpayer subsidized.
Right.
So you think now, if BNPP is running, that the Pinoys haven't already paid plenty for that? Especially since may mga, how many billion already na not one single second of power came out of that thing. Now we over $1 billion were it's so hypocritical. And unfortunately, many government officials don't even understand that. They buy the fiction na, oh, it's carbon-free because the plant does not put out any carbon. Bullshit. Sorry. Bull.
It's all right. Sir, in your perspective, how best can the Philippines transition to clean energy? Because a lot of people are saying, since we won't get clean energy with a snap of our fingers, parang kailangan muna natin mag-nuclear energy, kailangan muna natin gumamit ng natural gas. Parang, what do you think of this?
Well, nuclear energy, as I think I explained already, is not carbon-free. You have to mine your uranium from rock containing only 0.1% of uranium, and you have to mine the rock, you have to crush the rock, you have to extract the uranium, then you have to take the uranium-238 out of the away from the uranium-235, which is what you need. You have to make fuel pellets. All of that takes plenty of energy, and that will the amount of carbon dioxide produced by those processes will rival that produced by using the lower quality methane. Okay. Now the problem is, pag napatayo na yung power plant mo, siyempre habang tumatagal, yung content na uranium na mga ores bababa, because mining always takes the richer ore. So over time, paunti ng paunti yung lamang uranium, hindi ba? Ibig sabihin, parami yung ginagamit mong CO2 sa paggawa. At some point, it may be na you're making so much CO2 getting the uranium that you're actually making more CO2 than if you just burned natural gas.
Right.
Problema, committed ka na. You have this napakamahal na facility. You have to keep using it. So that becomes like what they call the nuclear trap. You're stuck. You made the decision to go nuclear. Now you're stuck.
Right.
So what are the alternatives, sir, that the Philippines can explore if we can't use nuclear, if we can't use natural gas? What are the alternatives?
I would start by using geothermal. And where would I start doing that? I would start doing that at Napot Point, where BNPP sits. I would use the facility of BNPP by drilling into the volcano and extracting heat from the volcano to run the turbines. So you would have you would make BNPP a geothermal plant. There were good studies na malinaw na yung maraming mga hot springs dun sa crater ng native, no? Ang sinasabi ng mga nag-aral na scientists, engineers, the source of the hot water is at least 200 degrees centigrade. If you went even deeper, lalong mainit. Now, if you make a geothermal plant out of BNPP, if there's an eruption or there's an earthquake, You will destroy that geothermal plant, but you won't be throwing out nuclear material. So tingin ko, there are also technologies for getting geothermal which are improving all the time. So it becomes possible na lahat ng mga coal-fired power plant may facility na, no?
Right.
Drill a hole deep enough so you can extract geothermal heat, however deep you have to go, and run the plant instead of with coal, with geothermal, which is clean. There are centuries and centuries of geothermal heat waiting here, just waiting to be used. The other thing, there's one more. The San Bernardino Strait between Luzon and Samar has powerful tides that go in and out every passage of the moon. And it's going fast, and then it stops. And while it stops, you can service your equipment, and then it flows the other way, back and forth. Gagawa yan ng electricity. If I were Bongbong Marcos, I would try to do better for the country by not doing nuclear, but by developing tidal power at San Bernardino Strait. That would give good power to the Visayas and good power to Southern Luzon. And it is a perfectly mathematically predictable source of energy, because the tides are mathematical. You can predict what the tides are going to be hundreds of years from now, precisely. And that's, to me, also one of the things. If I were president and I wanted to build a major monument, that's what I would do. I would build a tidal power institute manned by Filipino scientists, manned by Filipino engineers, and invite people from all over the world to study how to do this. So we become a leader, not just a follower.
Right.
This is the closest thing to a perpetual motion machine that exists in the world.
Sir, are there enough supporters from the academe, from the government, of turning these existing plants of, for example, BNPP
No.
to a geothermal plant?
No. The big problem is that nuclear is too powerful, has too powerful financial backing and governmental backing. And it's really all about family. Bongbong Marcos's ninong was Dandingco Huangco. Marco Huangco, his ninong was Ferdi Marcos. And so you have this double compare that's very powerful of government and money, and how can you beat that? The only hope is that perhaps Bongbong will see the light and will see that he can do a much better thing in perhaps making tidal power a reality, and making geothermal reality instead of relying on nuclear. Because then he would do much better than his father did. And every son wants to do better than his father. Take it from me.
We have been discussing different issues today during our discussion. Pero ang curious, and I've always been asking this in this show, what do you think, sir, are the environmental issues that remain underreported in media, even in the Philippines? What do you want to see more on the news?
Well, Reclamation is going ahead in part because of public acceptance of its going on. At the same time, there are very strong studies that say that reclamation is exceedingly dangerous. So the biggest problem is that the government is saying one thing and doing the other thing.
The other thing.
That is the real problem. And of course, that's how it comes out in the media too. So everybody believes that this is okay, when it is not okay. That's one of the things. There's another problem. In studying disaster, you need data. You need scientific data that has been gathered over the years.
Right.
The government does not want those data to be publicly accessible. But who paid for those data? It was the Filipino taxpayer who paid for that data, and so it must be freely available to everybody.
Right.
Why don't they want to share the data? Is it because there is some financial consequence to sharing? Or what? Or political consequence to sharing? I don't know. But I will say, yung mga data ngayon, binili ng taxpayer peso. Kaya it is the property of the people and it should be made freely available to everyone, not just here, but all over the world. Because then we can address the problems properly.
Right.
Another problem is yung pag-predict ng disaster. They use a technique that the Mines and Geoscience Bureau has been using a long time, and it's very bad. They call it determinative prediction. Ano ibig sabihin doon? Magkabaha, people go out and they talk in the different, nag-i-interview sila sa ibang barangay kung gaano kalalim at kung gaano katagal. Halimbawa, no? And they gather those data and then they make plans based on that. That is determinative, means you are looking back. You are looking backward. We need to predict what the hazards are going to be because the world is changing. How is the world changing? With climate change.
Right.
So you need to predict. Kung halimbawa the climate increases by 1 degree, what are the consequences? How much worse are the floods going to be? So you need to be what you call this, probabilistic. What is the probability that 10 years from now we're going to get what kind of flood? Probabilistic is looking toward the future. Deterministic is based on what happened before.
Right.
Di ba? Malinaw yun?
Right.
And that is crazy. It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Sir, we've talked a lot. We've talked a lot about environmental issues, and we've talked a lot about how bleak it is to look at the future. But you're working with, you're teaching young students, you're working with young geologists. Do you have any message of hope for them? Parang how can they continue working in this field when it's almost institutional that we're not listening to science enough, that we're not taking the climate crisis as seriously as we should?
Well, I'm an old man, no? You are young. The young have energy. The young have idealism. The young have drive. The young have desire. Young people who go into art suffer for their art because they love the art. Di ba? People will suffer in order to paint because they want to paint. Di ba? People who love science, who love nature, despite all of the obstacles, should keep on doing that. Follow your heart's desire. And if there are difficulties, because if you're a painter, you don't have any money, you need to spend time and you're not making money, but you do it anyway. If you are in love with science, follow your heart. And the obstacles, face the obstacles. While you have the energy of youth and the desire of youth and the idealism of youth.
So sir, ang bottom line, to suffer is to live.
Totoo ba yun? Well,
You tell me, sir, you've been here longer than me.
to suffer is to live, but I will tell you, I have been in a love affair with my best friend and soulmate for 51 years.
Sana all.
And that makes up for everything.
Aww.
So I will tell you, young people, find your soulmate.
Baka pa sa next episode natin. Pwede.
Post-Valentine's pala.
Yan ang topic natin.
Thank you, Dr. Kelvin, for joining us today. We really enjoyed our conversation with you.
Well, I enjoyed it too.
Thank you so much.
you.
If you have questions, even for Dr. Kelvin or for us, you can reach us at Iya Gozum on Twitter for Iya, and at G Geronimo for me on Instagram and Twitter. See you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.